Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Abdou. I work as a researcher and a consultant. I specialize on African startup ecosystems. And very recently, like this year, one of the most time-consuming research topic that I had was focused on the business models for startup support organizations in Africa. So it was a study that was produced with Digital Africa that you probably know, and that led us to interview more than 200 organizations and try to find basically the gaps between the needs of early-stage startups on the continent and the services that these organizations are able to produce. So the presentation that I have here was a presentation I did for the AfriLab's annual gathering last month. It was supposed to be a 30-minute presentation, so I won't have the time to take you to all the research in the 10 minutes that we have. What I will do instead is just go through it so that you can know how to apprehend it, and maybe tease you a little bit so that you can download it, and so you know where you can find all the resources that we worked on. So basically, we will start with that. Cool. The slides are all messed up. I'm sorry about this. So basically, what we did in order to understand and map the needs for early-stage startups is to try to take it from the very basics. So when you look at it wherever you are around the world, building a startup and growing a startup always requires the same 6 ingredients: capital, talent, conducive legal framework, I cannot read, knowledge and data, adequate infrastructure market, etc. And all these aspects are always found in the ecosystem where you are building, or they are brought in by the founder himself. And so what the first thing we notice is that in Africa, all these ingredients come in short supply. And that's where the ESOs come in, because they always come in order to compensate for the lack of involvement of other stakeholders. So basically, when you look at this in the US or in Europe, capital is brought by corporates, by different sort of venture capitalists, by private equity. We have different types of capital that are made available. Same goes for the knowledge, same goes from the industry maturity, etc. And all these stakeholders, which are corporates, government, risk capital providers, etc., are not involved enough in our ecosystems. And so basically, that's where entrepreneurs, support organizations come in and try to fill those gaps that are left vacant by these stakeholders. When we look at the market environments themselves, we notice that on each of these parameters, each of these columns, African countries are very heterogeneous. And even though, if I take South Africa, for example, or Egypt, within Egypt and within South Africa, if we take a more granular approach, we will realize that these disparities can be found even at the level of a country. That means different things. It means that entrepreneurship will not play the same role in a very competitive and sophisticated country or market than it will in a country like Sudan, where all the value chains are to build. And that also means that the way you support these entrepreneurs should be adapted and should be different from a region to another. As I said earlier, these 6 ingredients could also be brought in by the founder's personal background. And in order to try to map that as best as we could, we tried to focus on 4 different areas. The professional background of the founder, which will provide some industry knowledge, will provide some sort of networks, some sort of capital maybe before he starts his venture. His skills expertise, whether is it put on engineering, on sales, on strategy, etc. The personality of the founder, but also its education that will shed light on the length and the strengths of his personal networks. And this is also very well seen when you compare local founder with diaspora founders who went to elite universities outside. And so basically, we divided African founders into 5 categories, 5 categories that will shed light on their ability to succeed as a founder, but also that will shed light on some areas on which entrepreneur support organizations will have to focus in order to help them bridge the gaps that they will find in their ecosystem and that they are not able to bring by their own personal experience. So in the study, you will find a lot of details on this persona, what it means when you find them in different groups of countries, depending on the market environments they are. And finally, as I said, the last perspective on which we try to understand and map the needs for early stage founders is put on the, not on the industry, but the business types that they are building. And this is very important to consider because if you take, for example, one single industry like fintech, within fintech industry, you will have companies that are building infrastructure. You will have companies that are building SaaS products and that they try to sell to B2B. And you will find companies doing B2C and selling, I don't know, mobile money, for example. These are all very, very different businesses. If you position your targeting and your cohorts based on the industry only, you may find yourself having to support in the same program and in the same time frame companies that require a completely different skill set, a complete different time frame, and complete different knowledge stack in order to put them to market, to help them grow, to know how to invest in them, etc. So basically, what you will find in this study is one volume that is really focused on these three different perspectives and that shed lights on the areas to focus on depending on the persona that you have in front of you, the country where he is building his business, and finally the type of business that he is building. And the second volume of our study was more focused on the startup support organizations themselves, and the reason why we wanted to focus on that, because obviously, if we only assess startup support organizations in Africa based on their ability to produce highly successful startups, and why not unicorns, the first thing that is striking is that you have no more than 20 or 25 organizations across the continent that have demonstrated this track record. And so what it means, this is quite alarming because we have more than 1,200 organizations that enter into the support value chain for startups on the continent. And so the question was, why do the more than 1,000 organizations can't manage to do it? There are different ways to look at this question. The first thing is that, as I said, we only assess them based on their ability to produce high growth ventures, whereas most of these organizations are not really tailored to support startups. First of all, startups, sorry about the slide, it's not exactly the same, don't look at it exactly the rhythm that I wanted, but so when you look at the primary targets for most startup support organizations, you realize that, well, first of all, startup is not their primary target anymore. 80% of them have become program executants for founders or for donors. So the main beneficiary of the services that they are developing have become the funders, the donors themselves. And when you look at the type of businesses that are supported by these organizations, startups are only a minority of all the type of businesses that they support. Often in their course or in their programs, you will find mixed together startups being understood as high growth potential and high growth ambition ventures, but also SMEs, micro enterprises, and sometimes very social businesses. And while this is very laudable, supporting these different type of businesses require a complete different skill set, again, complete different budget, and complete different methodology. So why have we come to this, how have we come to this observation that only 20 to 25 organizations are truly able to support ventures, high growth ventures? The first thing that is striking when we compare the landscape of SSOs in Africa with the landscape of SSOs outside is that 90% of incubators or accelerators in the US or in Europe are directly attached to one specific stakeholder. Whether it is a corporate, whether it is a VC, whether it is government, this provides clarity. It provides a clear strategic mandate. And then the organization is staffed up, is skilled, and has the budget to be able to deliver the objective that is provided by the funding partner or by the stakeholder that is supporting the organization. In Africa, it's the opposite. 95% of the organizations that we surveyed are independent businesses. And as such, they face a contradictory injunction. So they have to keep growing as an independent business, as an independent organization, yet their product and their business is to deliver highly valuable services to a population that cannot afford them, and with a business model that is very tricky. So you cannot only rely on taking equity in the startups that you support. We all know, and we have said this a lot since this morning, liquidity events in Africa are very rare. So an incubator or an accelerator cannot fund its model based on only the equity that it takes. And so this original business model challenge has led most organizations to start fighting for money and fighting for grants. Here come the donors, the DFIs, who provide some sort of capital to these organizations, some sort of capital that seems to be enough for them to survive, but not necessarily enough for them to properly support startups and to help them achieve the growth objectives that we have. If you compare the low-end SSO budget allocation per startup with the best performing SSO budget allocation for startup, the delta is a 50-fold. So the low-end SSO will allocate 5 to 10K dollars per startup, whereas the best performing ones will allocate 250K. So if we focus on the last group, which are the survival SSOs, we have summed up the complexity that comes with the original business model challenge, because then the fact that they become executants of programs for donors divert them from the original mission that is supporting ventures and supporting founders. And so this creates a shift in their mission and a diversion of the small resources that they already have, leading then to a programmatic approach, to an adapted KPIs, unadapted with the perspective of time, but also unadapted with the perspective of actually creating growth versus creating impact, or I don't know what other consideration can be put upon them. And so all this, you will find in the study, it's well detailed, every point is well detailed and illustrated, but it invites all these organizations for a real strategic and cultural change that starts with the very basics, which is how you define your vision and how you define your mission in your ecosystem, because that's the foundation for a strong brand. And without a strong brand, you won't be able to attract the best funders, nor will you be able to attract enough donor money for you to pursue your activities. I see that Nafi is giving me some signs, so I won't go through everything of it. But all this will be published in the next days. I will probably send it to Christophe so that he can share it with his network and all of you guys. Yes, thank you for your time, and I hope I gave you a little bit of will to read it. Thank you all.